Hello and welcome to Politalks on Regent Park TV. I'm your host, Jason Clark, and we're here with Walied Khogali Ali, candidate for Toronto Centre in the upcoming Ward 13 election. So thank you for coming today. The first question I wanted to ask was, how did you get started in community involvement and politics in the city?
Thank you, Jason. So first of all, I want to thank Regent Park Focus for the opportunity, and I want to remind your audience that the work that we do in the community is actually driven by love, specifically a love of our neighbors, making sure that folks have the capacity to access programs and services, but most importantly, that we have the opportunities in our community that will make it possible for us to live a better life.
That's great. I appreciate that. So when did you first decide to run for city councillor?
Well, I decided to run for city councillor when I was talking to many of our community members who actually were tired of the irresponsible development that was happening. There was not many good jobs that were created. In fact, if you want to buy a house in this city, it costs $1.2 million, and household income has to be over $200,000, right? Yeah. So we need those $100,000 jobs that actually not just pay an affordable income, but most importantly, you have the benefits, vacation, and job security, so that you can work in our community and be who you are. And what I also, the other reason I ran for city council is just make sure that TTC fares never go up again. I believe that TTC fares are a tax on the poor and the most marginalized, and I believe that we need to move towards a fare free model like countries such as Norway and other developed countries. We do not punish the poor for accessing public services. So I got motivated because folks in our community actually asked me to run. They've seen the great work that I've done when it comes to human rights. They've seen the great work that I've done in supporting our youth and our seniors. And they've seen the great work that I've done when it comes to environmental stewardship, because I was actually the president of Toronto Environmental Alliance.
Okay, those are great foundations to leave for the future for our city. That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, what do you feel the role of a city councillor is, and what can you do as a best candidate for a ward? What can you do?
Well, a city councillor has to be a good advocate, and I'm going to be advocating on behalf of the residents of Toronto Centre.
Right.
Specifically, I'm going to make sure that we don't have developments that just are put together by developers, while the constituents, well, specifically our community, is not engaged in making decisions about that development. Mm-hmm. And the other thing a city council has to do is actually help residents, not just find opportunities within our city, but also promote our businesses, promote our city, right? When it comes to what we're able to offer our residents, but most importantly, why we want to be a world-class city. Because I think we can become a world-class city, but we need to eliminate a lot of barriers for residents living in this city.
That's great. That's wonderful. So what do you feel are going to be the main challenges to success in this role?
I believe the challenge will be to make sure that many members of our community get involved. Decisions are made at City Hall, but those are decisions that need to be informed by community. I am going to be the city councillor that's not going to take the voices of City Hall to the community, but I'm going to be championing the voices of community to City Hall. And that's my attitude when it pertains to being a public servant, being a public representative. So what I'm hoping is to engage residents in the work that we do. Whether it's creating good jobs in our community, whether it's making sure that our community is safe, whether it's making sure that we have accessible transit, truly accessible transit, or whether it's making sure that our neighbors live with dignity and integrity. I'm sick and tired of visiting my neighbors who live in Toronto community housing, and they've been asked to live in deplorable conditions, whether it's bed bugs and pests, whether it's not enough cleanliness within the buildings because folks are not taking care of our beautiful housing. Yeah. And I think as a city, we need to commit more resources to make sure that our residents live with integrity.
That's great. That's great. So what would you say are the three most important accomplishments in your life or as your career in politics?
Well, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Well, I love my family. I love my friends. I love my community. I love my neighbors. But what I have been doing is actually helping people. So when I was involved in the student movement, I pushed for a UPass program that helped students get around the city, especially the city of Mississauga actually, by paying a very nominal fee, but they got unlimited transit, all right, access to transit across the city, and that was a big accomplishment. The other accomplishment, as I led the Toronto Environmental Alliance. It's an environmental movement that I deeply care for because I believe the issues related to climate change affect all of us. It affects us not just here in Canada, it affects us around the world. And we have a lot of people that come from around the world that live in Regent Park, and they understand the threats posed by climate change seriously. One of my other accomplishments was to fight with residents to make sure our bus routes were not cut, our library hours were not cut, especially by then Councilor Doug Ford and the administration that he was a part of. And the reason why I feel so strongly about protecting our public services is because a lot of us depend on those public services. And then we need to make sure that they're truly public. And most importantly, we need to make sure that they're truly accessible, because there's so much need out there, because a lot of folks are struggling just to basically make ends meet in the city. And we need to make sure that our city is more affordable.
Great. So how do you feel about Premier Ford's decisions based on the impact it's had on the upcoming election?
My God. Well, Premier Doug Ford is an interesting personality, and I'll tell you one thing about him is he's trying to put forward an austerity agenda that's going to affect a lot of us. In fact, most of us. His cuts towards our schools, like $100 million that could have gone into rebuilding our schools, making our schools much more better for our children, specifically for parents as well, because parents also involved in their schooling. And you know what? That is problematic. He's actually has a track record of cutting services for the residents of Toronto. And what I want to do is I want to defend our city from future cuts. I am going to be the best representative for Toronto Centre because I understand the lived experiences of folks living in our neighborhoods, and I really do understand what those services mean to them. Those hours being cut for our bus routes has an impact on how people actually live in the city, right? Like how they move from one job to another job. But what people want is they want real solutions. And Doug Ford is not offering real solutions. He's offering an austerity agenda. I am offering a way forward where we actually invest in our community so that we create opportunities that sustain communities, because it's too in flux right now. We're dealing with gentrification. We're dealing with a lot of folks who are actually getting pushed out of the city because of economic reasons. And we need to take a stand for our community and actually push to make sure that it's more affordable, it's more inclusive, and most importantly, we create the opportunities that we need to make sure that folks have actual access to good jobs.
Right. So, as you have said, what do you think? Like you've said, you've raised a number of issues. What do you think are the most important issues facing our constituents or your constituents?
I think it's community safety, and I also think it's good jobs. I think we have many folks living in our community that are working so hard, that are brilliant, that are underemployed, that are unemployed, and are going through displacement. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that community is no longer in flux, so that we could deal with the community safety concerns that we all share, so that we could work together through a process where we empathize with each other's experiences, where we understand that, we're all human beings. And the main reason I'm actually running for city council is I don't want our political rhetoric to be hateful. I want to make sure that it's focused on human rights, because whatever we build, my friend, wouldn't matter if it's not founded on human rights.
That's great. So you raise empathy as one of the things that you want to bring across to the citizens and to the constituents. So how do you think that the constituents can get involved in these issues?
So grassroots organizing, and we actually have a great grassroots campaign that we're running that is involving residents in the decisions that we make. Actually, our platform, the commitment that I'm making to residents, was informed by residents, and it started years in the making, right? It was through my advocacy in the community that I understood these issues very well, but it was done in a much more formal way where we invited residents to a campaign launch or office opening, to other focus groups that we set up in the community that focused on transit, on housing, on dealing with the opiate crisis, on dealing with also other challenges that we're facing in the community, specifically when it comes to our underemployment and our unemployment. And I'm actually pushing for real solutions, right, for residents of Regent Park and the rest of Toronto Centre. And those real solutions are focused on the people. Specifically, I'm pushing for a pathway to home ownership because I believe housing is a right. And I believe that residents of the city need to have a choice whether they want to rent or own. I'm also pushing to make sure that we eliminate barriers for public services like transit. I'm putting forward a model where we move away from a fare-based model to a fare-free model. And the reason why we need to do that is because we need to end the constant push for funding from commuters and members of the public that actually can't afford to pay more.
That's great. So you raised a number of issues yet again there. And I think the opiate crisis is one of the most prevalent ones. Do you have a solution? Like you said, you're solution oriented. Do you have an idea of how you would handle that?
Exactly. Well, we have to think about mental health as being a primary reason as to why folks are impacted by this crisis.
Right.
So we need to put resources towards supporting the mental health of our neighbors and folks in our community. That means we need more resources on the ground to deal with that, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think that crisis will be alleviated by having more, guns or boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. That's not going to help. We've seen the interactions between members of law enforcement and folks in mental health, and it's actually ended in tragedy. And that's someone's son, that's someone's daughter, that's someone's family member, right? So we need to make sure we put the right investments for that to happen. The other reason is we need to eliminate the systemic barriers or causes specifically that exist for poverty. We need to make sure that folks are properly housed. We need to make sure that there's a pathway, not just to home ownership, but to good employment, to meaningful employment, to good jobs. It also means that we need to have a very well-resourced social services sector that is there to support folks get to where they need to get to when it comes to finding the career, when it comes to engaging in the work they do. And most importantly, we need to think about how we better support our seniors and our youth and folks who are on the margins, because this city belongs to them too.
That's great. So we're just wrapping up here. I just have one final question for you, just a quick one. Is there any other thing that you'd more like to share with us, or anything else that you think that is important for this upcoming election?
I will want people to vote early in the advanced polls. It's next week, actually, on Wednesday, October 10th. I am going to work diligently to try to get a polling station right here in Regent Park. Unfortunately, they did not put a polling station in Regent Park, and I know in the provincial elections, about 1,000 of our neighbors actually voted in Regent Park at the polling station, at the advanced polling station specifically. So I'm going to do my part, but I want people to get involved in the political process. I want folks to vote for me specifically because I am the community candidate. I was just walking to your studio and I saw a picture of my dad up on the wall, right? It reminded me of when we used to live in Bartholomew and what this community actually means to me and means to all of us. So I am sincere. I am someone who's very committed to supporting our community, but most importantly, advocating on behalf of residents when it pertains to accessing housing, transit, good jobs, and most importantly, opportunities that we should provide as a city to make sure that we're a world-class city.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for watching Politalks. I've been your host, Jason Clark, for RPTV, and we've been with candidate for Toronto Centre, Ward 13, Walied Khogali Ali.
Thank you for having me. I hope you visit votewalied.ca to find out more about our campaign, and looking forward to meeting each one of you. Thank you.